Before we get into today's edition of Just the Truth, let me tell you about the latest special from Michael and Dale at MyPillow. The standard MyPillow, normally $49.98 for a limited time only, just $14.88 with promo code Joey. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener specials, and see all the specials. There's a limited quantity of just 10 at this special price. That's $14.88 with promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studio. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Breaking news over the weekend, 3 hostages have been returned to their families just prior to the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump today. We have the details for you in today's show. Broadcasting from the nation's capital, it was a busy weekend leading up to today's inauguration, where later this morning President-elect Donald Trump will become president. Donald Trump once again. Yesterday was filled with various pre-inaugural events, and boy, it was an exciting time in Washington, D.C. President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance participated in a very solemn wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of an unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. Later this morning, of course, when President-elect Donald Trump takes the oath of office, he'll have his hand on 2 Bibles. We have the details of why. Traveling to South Carolina yesterday, outgoing President Joe Biden says, "I'm not going anywhere," this in his final address before leaving office. President-elect Trump saved TikTok just in time for today's inauguration day. Will this proposed deal protect U.S. interest? We'll talk with you about what we know. It's a busy day and a special day for our nation.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
President-elect Donald Trump and the Vice President participated in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. This is just one of those historic traditions prior to the inauguration of the president. The event marks, of course, the eve of Trump returning to the White House today. The ceremony was held under drizzly skies. It was sort of a dark day yesterday in Washington. Some snow in the afternoon, rain throughout the day, and it was part of a series of Washington events preceding Trump's inauguration today. Melania Trump attended along with their children. The vice president and his wife, of course, there as well. Some other notable attendees included several of Trump's key cabinet picks. Pete Hegseth, nominated for Defense Secretary. Marco Rubio, nominated for Secretary of State. Tulsi Gabbard, nominated for Director of National Intelligence. And Elise Stefanik, nominated for United Nations Ambassador. The ceremony is marked by a quiet reverence. President-elect Trump laid a wreath on an easel at the tomb of the unknown soldier, saluted solemnly. Vice President J.D. Vance also handed, with a hand over his heart, also moments later, laid a wreath of his own as the silent crowd looked on. After the ceremony, Trump and Vance both departed Arlington National Cemetery and continued preparations for today's inauguration. So here's what to expect today. When Trump takes the office, he will have his hand on 2 Bibles as he takes the oath. One is his personal Bible, given to him by his mother back in 1955, to commemorate his Sunday church primary school graduation at First Presbyterian Church in Jamaica, New York. This Bible holds deep sentimental value, we're told, to the president. As you can imagine, the first Bible given to you by your mom. I still have mine. It's a special day and a special Bible. It has his name embossed on the front cover, signatures from church officials inside. The second Bible, of course, is the Lincoln Bible, famously used by President Abraham Lincoln during his first inauguration in 1861. This iconic burgundy velvet-bound Bible is part of the Library of Congress collection. It's only been used 3 times since Lincoln's presidency, twice by President Obama and once by Trump during his first inauguration in 2017. And there's more symbolism in this as well. When President-elect Trump is sworn in inside the Capitol Rotunda today, rather than outside where we all had been excited to be, we're told, though, that inside of the Rotunda, where the president will be sworn in, he'll be facing a bust of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., a fitting nod to the legacy of Dr. King on this federal holiday, which is in his honor. The inaugural committee says that the ceremony represents both Trump's personal faith and his respect for America's traditions. The two Bibles, each with their own rich history, underscores Trump's connection to his roots, to his past, to his family, and, of course, to his responsibility as being leader of the free world. More on the inauguration a little bit later in today's show. It's an exciting time in Washington. Someone asked me yesterday what the overall mood was, and I said if I could sum it up in one word, and it's that word that we've talked about recently that a lot of Americans have used, and that's hope. I've heard a lot of people, just the excitement and the hope for our country once again. Moving on, these 3 hostages that were handed over to Israel by Hamas arrived at a hospital in stable conditions, according to officials. Emily Damari, 28 years old, Doron Stenbreicher, 31, and Rami Gonen, 24, saw their loved ones at an Israeli hospital following their release by Hamas on Sunday. The Director General of Sheba Medical Center said over the next few days they will undergo a battery of medical tests in order to prepare proper treatments after enduring such a torturous experience at the hands of Hamas terrorists. Now think about this. These 3 women were held in captivity for 471 days following their capture by Hamas October the 7th. The family of Doron Steinbrecher, one of the 3 hostages, thanked the people of Israel and President-elect Trump for her release. The family's statement said, after an unbearable 471 days, our beloved Dodo, as she was known, has finally returned to our arms. We want to express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who supported and accompanied us along this journey. A special thank you to the people of Israel for their warm embrace, unwavering support, and the strength they gave us during our darkest moments. We also extend our gratitude to President Trump for his significant involvement and support, which meant so much to us. I think the bottom line here is most people recognize that Donald Trump being inaugurated today is the reason these hostages were released, and we'll see more released in the coming days, I'm convinced. The mother of British-Israeli Emily Damari thanked the world for helping secure her release from the terror group. She said, after 471 days, Emily is finally home. I want to thank everyone that never stopped fighting for Emily throughout this horrendous ordeal and who never stopped saying her name in Israel. Britain, the United States, and around the world, thank you for bringing Emily home. Several of the other folks who were involved in this, again, thanked Donald Trump for his involvement. Here in Washington, families of the hostages gathered yesterday to urge President-elect Trump to ensure the ceasefire and hostage deal is fully implemented. They gathered in front of the Washington Monument to address the public, the hostages, missing families forums. They posted on X, "We welcome each freed hostage with open arms, but our fight continues until all 94 hostages return home." And that's what we have to keep in mind, is yes, we celebrate those 3, but there's a lot more left who need to be home. The gathering in Washington yesterday featured giant banners with messages like President Trump, you can make it happen, bring them home now. And images of the hostages who are still in Gaza were plastered all around. People were walking around with signs with the images of these people who are still away from their families. And the crowd chanted, "Bring them home now, bring them home now." Yonatan Dekel Shin, father of American-Israeli hostage Saguwa Dekel Shin, stated, "I want to thank the press for keeping their attention for the sake of the hostages and for the people standing behind us this whole time. Seeing the United States and understanding the United States as a beacon on the hill to the rest of the world." And I think that's the overall theme of this, is so many people, of course, thanking President Donald Trump, and again, because they know that had it not been for Donald Trump, their loved one would probably still be held by Hamas with no end in sight, because they certainly were not going to release these hostages because of anything that Joe Biden did. They weren't afraid of Joe Biden, just like the world was not afraid of Joe Biden because they knew that they could manipulate Joe Biden. They know that when Donald Trump said just over a week ago that if the hostages are not released by the time I'm inaugurated, all hell will break loose. And they took him for his word. They understood that Donald Trump would deliver on that threat. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And again, that's what I've seen. That's the overall theme here in Washington as I've walked around and talked to various people about Donald Trump being inaugurated again today is there's a new day in America. There's a new sheriff in town. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. There's a lot of talk about making America great again, and it begins with making America healthy again. Dr. Ashley Lucas and her team at PhD Weight Loss are at the forefront to educate and guide you to be your best self. The millions being spent in propping up Big Pharma are astounding, only to create long-term dependency and harmful side effects. Let's take a natural approach that isn't connected to a pharmaceutical company's bottom line. The coaches at PhD Weight Loss will show you how. The entire program is centered around science and nutrition, a proven roadmap that has helped over 8,000 clients lose over 331,000 pounds. You'll learn what to eat and when, how to quiet cravings, and finally get rid of that belly fat. Plus, you'll never take a medication. How many pounds would you like to lose in 2025? Do it the natural way with PhD Weight Loss, here to lead the charge to make America healthy again. Call PhD Weight Loss and schedule your consultation. 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900, or go to myphdweightloss.com. Continuing our show from Washington, D.C. today, Politico, who is really no big fan of President-elect Donald Trump, took great pride in writing on Friday this: Donald Trump won't be crowing about crowd size at his second inauguration. Barely more than 2,000 people will pack into the Capitol Rotunda for a cold weather inaugural ceremony backup plan not seen since Ronald Reagan. This was written Friday after we all learned that the inauguration will not take place outside this year. It's disappointing, but we are all making the best of it. The call to move the swearing in and the inaugural address indoors was made by the Trump team, we're told, on Friday after the forecasters talked about what the weather conditions could potentially be today. And it's cold, folks. It's cold. This then led to a major pivot that had to be executed by the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, with hundreds of workers across Capitol Hill who literally had less than 72 hours to pull it off, and they're still working this morning trying to get it done. There are many disappointed patriots in Washington this weekend. Just a tiny fraction of Trump supporters who travel to Washington will actually get to see the ceremonies in person. The Rotunda crowd will mostly be comprised of lawmakers, we're told, high-ranking officials, and, of course, Donald Trump's family. In addition to the disappointed ticket holders, myself being one of those, a shout-out to Republican staffers on Capitol Hill who watched weeks of their hard work of securing tickets for people like me basically to just be washed away. Basically, no members of the general public will be able to attend today, and these staffers worked very hard. It was a juggling act. They had a lot of requests for these tickets, and they worked hard to allocate them as fairly as they could, only to see the tickets become a commemorative item. After hearing rumors that this was going to happen, I received an email from Representative William Timmons' office with the statement from the House Sergeant of Arms saying that they have been informed by the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies that the 60th inaugural ceremonies will be held inside of the U.S. Capitol. They went on to talk about how a majority of the ticketed guests will not be able to attend their ceremonies in person. Representative Timmons' staff said that we were happy to still come by and pick up our tickets, but explaining that the tickets assigned to you are purely commemorative. So, yes, it's disappointing, but it is what it is. The good part is Donald Trump is still going to become president a little bit later today, and that's the good news. The irony of this story is that Senator Amy Klobuchar, who Trump nicknamed Snow Woman after she famously launched her presidential campaign in a snowstorm, remember that? She's chair of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, and she was tasked with overseeing the move to an indoor inauguration ceremony. In her statement on Friday, she said, "We respect the decision of the president-elect and his team." In the wake of Trump's announcement, as you can imagine, there was a flurry of activity, pun intended, in the rotunda as the architect of the Capitol workers assembled a stage platform and other preparations were clearly underway to move this outdoor event that workers had been preparing since September the 18th to an indoor event in just a matter of 72 hours. But it's not the first time this has happened. There is precedent for this. 40 years ago, during former President Reagan's second inauguration in 1985, I remember it. I wasn't there, but I remember it. I was in college at the time. Actually, I just finished college. A severe cold snap on the East Coast moved Reagan's second inauguration inside, too. The inaugural parade was canceled. Reagan was sworn in an absolutely packed rotunda. The last inauguration to be moved indoors before Reagan was 76 years earlier than that, when William Taft in 1909 faced a blizzard that hit Washington the night before. Then, of course, you probably have heard the tale of William Henry Harrison, who is believed to have caught a cold during his chilly inauguration, where he gave a lengthy speech wearing no hat, no gloves, or a coat. That led to pneumonia that was believed to have killed him just a few weeks later, although some historians say that it probably was the lack of a sewer system, that he probably had some type of poisoning that actually killed him. As I have read many places, he really enjoyed himself after the inauguration. He drank and ate a lot of stuff. One thing that has not changed, though, this weekend is the security on Capitol Hill. And I'd already been told by a number of people here as we were looking to prepare, we were looking to broadcast. I was going to be out in the crowd later today, broadcasting along with Mike Gallagher, who's going to be back in the studio, and we're still going to be carrying the coverage for you. So we knew that security was tight, but I've talked to a number of people this weekend who said they've never seen security like it has been this weekend. Everywhere I looked over the last couple of days, and last night as we were at the South Carolina Ball, we went to Charlie Kirk's Turning Point Ball. Boy, was that something. There's heavy security everywhere. And it makes you almost wonder just how much easier it was to make the decision to move this indoors because of the weather, but also knowing that security was going to be a tough thing. So what are we expecting today? The forecast today kind of mimics 1985, Reagan's. The high temperature that day was 17 degrees with sunny skies and an afternoon with wind chills in the minus 10 to minus 20 degree range. As I mentioned earlier, the parade was canceled for Reagan as well. Today's inauguration will be very similar. It's going to be sunny. The wind chill already is in the lower teens, single digits. Winds could be gusting up to 35 miles per hour around lunch or in the afternoon. During the time of the ceremony right now, it is expected that the temperature will be in the lower 20s. One other thing, talking about Ronald Reagan, he actually has the distinction of having the coldest inauguration and also having the warmest inauguration. The warmest January inauguration day took place in 1981, the first time Ronald Reagan was inaugurated. And the all-time record high for an inauguration took place in 1974 with the inauguration of Gerald Ford. It was 83 degrees. Now, that's what I was hoping for today. I was hoping for a bright, sunny day, a nice, warm day, but it just wasn't in the cards. And again, maybe this was God's way of protecting Donald Trump. Maybe this was God's way of keeping thousands and thousands of people from being out on the mall for a potential security issue. I don't know. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy that in a few hours, Donald Trump's going to be our president again. Continuing today's show from the nation's capital, where, again, in just a few hours, Donald John Trump will take the oath of office, become the 47th president of the United States. It's a cold day in Washington, and, of course, it's a disappointing day as thousands of people have traveled to see the inaugural festivities. They've been moved inside to the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol building, where it will be televised, but just elected officials, the Trump family, will be the only ones who will be there in person. Let's momentarily change topics from today's inauguration. We'll get back to that in just a minute. And revisit a topic that we discussed last week concerning the $1.8 billion mystery fund that the state of South Carolina has been dealing with for about 2 years now. You heard this story? We talked about it some last week. Last week, we received an auditor's report that confirmed that the $1.8 billion does not exist. Never has, evidently. Now, my question is, how? How do you make an accounting error of this size and it take this long to figure it out? And how does this error go on for a number of years? Because if you followed the story, it started a few years ago. We'll get to that in just a minute with Comptroller General Rich Ekstrom, who ended up losing his job. And at that point in time, he claimed that it was an accounting error that had happened over 10 years prior to that had just been updated year after year. Now, last week, State Treasurer Curtis Loftus spoke with my colleague, Tara Servatius, on the Tara Show, and he assured us that the money isn't missing, never has been missing, he said, and asked that we trust that the Treasurer's office is watching over our money. Here's Treasurer Curtis Loftus.
So the report came out yesterday, and I linked to it on my Facebook page, State Treasurer Curtis Loftus, and it's linked to on the website too. And we didn't link to the whole. I mean, we actually did link to the whole thing, but I think what people will be interested in is the findings, what they found and what they recommend, because it's about 70 pages, but the findings are 3 or 4 pages. And if you want to read this report, read it at night because it'll put you to sleep.
Yeah.
It's complex legalese and accounting and government speak and all that. But the summary is easy to see. And we feel very good about the report. There were about 20 findings and recommendations. We were in one of them, and we were kind of jointly in a second one. The Comptroller General was in about 17 of them. So we feel good about it. And what the report showed us was that there was no mystery bank account with $1.8 billion. There never was, and there never has been. It was a fiction. There's no missing money at all. The state treasurer's office deals in cash and investments. We can visit that money at the banks or at the investment houses. We know exactly how it is. We don't control the rest of the accounting, but we control ours. Sadly, we don't get to use ours like that. All the money's accounted for, always has been, always will be. All the investments are accounted for, always have been, always will be. You see, last night we had $53 billion. We know where every penny is. I get a report every morning at 9 o'clock that shows me all of that. And so we have the factual basis to make all of these statements. The problem is we don't control everybody. And so I want people to feel confident that we know where your money is. We look after it. We take care of it. I can't control what people say. They have their own agendas, but I can't control what the Treasurer's office does.
Do you feel better now? Look, let me say, I do trust Curtis Loftus, but I'm still just puzzled and concerned about what is going on because I still don't understand how this happened. Former Comptroller General Rich Ekstrom, again, resigned his elected office over this fiasco. There was something there for him to walk away from his job. Now, it appears that there's some in the legislature who are now wanting Mr. Loftus to lose his job. The state newspaper over the weekend wrote, after confirmation that most of a mysterious $1.8 billion did not exist, calls for the removal of Treasurer Curtis Loftus, a Republican, were renewed. Now, according to the state, House Speaker Merle Smith, who called the accounting areas incompetence, still would not call for the removal of Loftus as lawmakers are now reviewing a report from this independent outside forensic auditor that they received last week. The speaker said in a statement, this is just accounting errors that have been compounded over a number of years. There were some recommendations that we received from Alex Partners. This is the auditing firm. We're reviewing those recommendations and intend to enact those recommendations as soon as possible. He went on to say, I think it's important to note this is not any fraud. This is not a misrepresentation. That this is just incompetence and errors that have occurred over a period of time. State Representative Heather Bauer, a Democrat from Richland County, who tried to get Loftus's salary reduced to $1 last year, has filed a resolution calling for impeachment. State Senator Larry Grooms, who is a Republican from Berkeley County, who led a Senate Finance Committee panel that investigated the $1.8 billion last year, has renewed his call for Loftus to resign. Of course, House Republicans hold a supermajority, and they could do this at any time if they wanted to. Curtis Loftus, of course, is a Republican. State Representative Micah Caskey, a Republican from Lexington, said, I think it's premature to say who should lose jobs. We've had this report for less than 24 hours, he said. I think it would be irresponsible to jump out and say people should lose their jobs. Well, let me ask you this, and I'd love to hear from you, those of you, my accountants out there who are listening, maybe some CPAs. If you had made an $1.8 billion accounting error and you had prolonged that for a number of years, would you lose your job? Dave Bly is a director with Alex Partners, said the issue of the $1.8 billion was known by the treasurer, comptroller general, and the state auditor offices. Bly said, we see this as a shared fault. We see this as a shared awareness. So he's saying that Curtis Loftus knew this problem was there all along. Now, we do have a kind of an odd situation in South Carolina where we have an elected treasurer, which I support. We have an elected comptroller general. I support that too. I'm not one of these who thinks that we need to have all of these offices under the governor's office. You know, we have consolidated a number of state agencies over the years. But when you do that, you put more power in the governor's office. I like the idea that I get to vote on the treasurer. So when Curtis Loftus' name is on the ballot again, if he chooses to run again, you and I get to decide if he did his job. Now, it appears that the House Ways and Means Committee is going to be the first to be able to question some of these people involved in this. As Speaker Smith said, the House investigation is just beginning, but will include hearings, the first of which was last week when Alex Partners gave their report. Next, the House Ways and Means Committee panel will be reviewing this as well. The Comptroller General's office, the Treasurer's office, and State Auditor will have to make their annual budget presentations in front of the House Ways and Means Committee. I can imagine there's going to be some questions going on there. Representative Caskey said, we're going through this deliberately and methodically. You know, in this business, there's a lot done for political purposes, but in the end of the day, our responsibility is to govern this state and to ensure we do what's best. And unfortunately, that's not always conducive to quick action. Well, look, we've been trying to figure this out for 2 years, so why get in a hurry now? The House last year also passed legislation to remove the state auditor from being under the purview of the treasurer and the comptroller general. The bill did not pass, though. Similar legislation has been filed this year, and making the change is one of the recommendations by Alex Partners. In 2023, when Comptroller Richard Ekstrom disclosed originally the $3.5 billion overstatement of cash balances, the House voted to reduce Ekstrom's pay $1. The House Judiciary Committee also had planned to have a panel of lawmakers start considering the Ekstrom impeachment resolution. Didn't get to take it that far because before they could start impeachment, Comptroller Ekstrom resigned. Now, the difference here is when that was going on, there was a good bit of pressure being applied to Rich Ekstrom for him to move on. Right now, there doesn't appear to be quite that much pressure on Curtis Loftus, our treasurer. And it could be that simply because Curtis Loftus has a higher profile. He maintains a strong social media presence, has a big following. That was not the case with Rich Ekstrom. Now, House Speaker Merle Smith said that social media following would not influence the House's actions. He said there's politics and there's government, and we're going to govern. But we have other problems because of the questions surrounding the state's financials. The Securities and Exchange Commission is now investigating state finances. Lawmakers have to be worried that the state's credit rating could be affected. Now, here's the real mystery, though, and this is why I say I don't quite understand this. Last year, when this was being discussed, Treasurer Curtis Loftus said that the $1.8 billion had been invested and had generated up to $250 million in earnings. But with most of the money not existing, questions are now arising over, well, how is that even possible? And why would the treasurer, if he seems to have known that this was an issue all along, why would he have said, well, we've been investing that and we've earned over $250 million? That's not even possible. You can't earn dividends and interest on money that's not there. And this has really raised additional questions. State Representative Chris Murphy, who leads the House Ways and Means panel that oversees these departments, Murphy said he made some statements that we know were false, and we relied on those statements. There needs to be some accountability, so that's something that we'll consider. Now, Dave Bly of Alex Partners in the report was a little more blunt. He said, I don't believe there's any way it could have earned any money on those investments or on that balance because it does not represent real cash. And he's referencing a Facebook post from Treasurer Loftus, who said that the $1.8 billion was real money. Loftus said it existed in an accounting fund, not a mysterious bank account. Again, a lot more questions right now than there are answers. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Continuing today's show from Washington, D.C., where just a little later this morning, we will see President Donald Trump sworn in as the 47th president. Of course, this is saying goodbye to a very dark chapter in our country's history. Joe Biden will be leaving office today. He was in South Carolina yesterday saying, I'm not going anywhere, in his final address before leaving office. So the question is, well, what's next for Joe Biden, if you care? Outgoing President Biden delivered a farewell address in South Carolina, vowing to remain active in public life. Biden reflected on his time in office, promoting his clemency record, and assured the congregation at this church in Charleston, South Carolina, I'm not going anywhere, he said. He spoke at the Royal Missionary Baptist Church in Charleston yesterday, celebrating Martin Luther King Day one day early. In his final public appearance as president, he reflected on his legacy. He talked about his record on criminal justice reform. He noted that he issued more commutations and pardons than any other president, commuted harsh sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, and aspired to end the federal death penalty. And we all saw those commutations just a few weeks ago, some killers in South Carolina, although he did not commute the sentence of Dylan Roof. During his speech, Biden emphasized the themes of redemption, of hope, saying the struggle to redeem the soul of this nation is difficult and ongoing, he said. He thanked the people of South Carolina and described his presidency as the honor of my life, he said. He closed with a declaration of, I'm not kidding, I'm not going anywhere. Now, at 82 years old and barely able to complete a sentence and to know where he was yesterday, remember what he ordered for lunch, Joe Biden made it clear that he intends to stay engaged in public life. I just don't see that happening. Earlier in the day, Biden granted clemency to 5 more individuals, including posthumously pardoning Marcus Garvey, the early 20th century black nationalist and political activist. Biden framed the acts as part of his commitment to justice and mercy, saying that they reflect a belief in moving pain to purpose. Again, I doubt that he consulted with the victims of the families of these. Biden returns to Washington this morning sometime. He will be, of course, at some of the traditional historical events with President Trump. They'll meet at the White House. They'll have tea at the White House. And Biden will then say goodbye. He will attend the inauguration. As Biden, of course, leaves his presidency, speculation about what a post-White House life for Joe Biden looks like. He pledged to remain active, but can he? The specifics remain unclear of just what he's capable of doing. Will he focus on advocacy, philanthropy? Will he write? I don't think he does any of those. I just don't think he's able to. You know, you had former presidents like Jimmy Carter, who, when he left the presidency, he was in pretty good health. He was able to dedicate the remainder of his life to working with, like, Habitat for Humanity, where he would often put on his tool belt with his hammer and help build the houses. You're not going to see Joe Biden doing that type of thing. He's just not able to. Joe Biden is past that part of his life. I just hope that he goes, he finds peace, and we don't have to worry about Joe Biden ever again. Speaker Mike Johnson, by the way, had an interesting observation. He says that Joe Biden forgot that he paused LNG exports. This revelation by the House Speaker said that President Biden reportedly forgot that he had signed an executive order pausing liquefied natural gas exports last year. And according to the Speaker, Biden was unaware of the order's consequences, leaving Americans to ask who was really in charge. I would say that that's probably been the case in a lot of the executive orders that Joe Biden has signed. Speaker Johnson shared this troubling story on Barry Weiss's podcast, Honestly. He described a January 2024 Oval Office meeting where Joe Biden's staff pushed for Ukraine funding. When Johnson raised concerns about Biden's LNG export pause, the president reportedly denied signing the executive order. Johnson recounted Biden's words, saying, "I didn't do that." When reminded of the order, Biden insisted it wasn't a pause on exports, prompting the Speaker to suggest they review the document together. So let's talk about the stakes here. Biden's decision to pause LNG exports has been widely criticized, even by members of his own party. Industry experts say that the move fuels Vladimir Putin's war machine by forcing our allies to rely on Russian gas. A study from the National Association of Manufacturers found that the pause could cost nearly 1 million jobs and slash U.S. GDP by as much as $215 billion by 2044. That's not just bad policy. It's a national security risk, and it kind of tells you the condition Joe Biden has been, particularly in this last year. He didn't have a clue with what he's done. Speaker Johnson didn't mince words. He said that Biden's apparent lack of awareness left him deeply concerned, stating, "We're in serious trouble. Who is running the country?" It's a question many Americans have been asking for the last year, 2 years at least, as they have watched Joe Biden struggle with decision-making and accountability on major issues like energy and foreign policy and our southern borders. This isn't the first time that Biden's energy policies have sparked outrage. Just last week, he announced sweeping bans on offshore oil and gas drilling in 625 million acres of federal waters, further straining the U.S. energy sector. You think he understood what he was doing then? You think he had a clue of exactly what he was doing when he signed that executive order? President-elect Trump has made it very clear he plans to reverse a number of Joe Biden's disastrous energy policy today, later this afternoon at 2 o'clock. It has been reported that President Trump has over 200 executive orders ready to be signed, and none too soon. Sources close to President Trump say that he will prioritize LNG exports as a cornerstone of his new agenda, focusing on creating jobs, boosting GDP, and strengthening national security, all in the same swoop of a pen. Trump has vowed to unleash America's energy potential and restore the U.S. as a global energy leader. It's one of a number of things that we're going to see. Quickly, Could you believe what took place with TikTok over the weekend? Now, again, I'm not a big TikTok fan. Don't know a whole lot about TikTok. I watched some of it myself, but it got pretty interesting when the media started reporting on Saturday that the service had gone down, and I think ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, closed it down Saturday on purpose because they got the backlash, the roar of people who use it, as they had expected. President-elect Trump announced on Truth Social that he plans to issue an executive order today to extend the timeline for TikTok's operations. The order will delay enforcement of the bipartisan law signed by President Biden, which mandated TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, sell the platform or face a U.S. ban. Trump's order also ensures that service providers who kept TikTok operational won't face any penalties as a result of it either. This is going to be an interesting one to watch for sure. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.